So chapter 13, I stood upon the sand of the sea, right? So John, now you picture him, he stood on the seashore, simple as that, and he's looking out at the sea. So John was taken on this spirit trip, and he's now placed on the sand of the sea. So a nice sandy beach, in fact. And again, you're kind of picturing the sea really stormy here. So not such a nice, summery, sandy beach day. If you've ever gone to a sandy beach on a stormy day, well, there's no one around. The odd soul likes to go out on a stormy day. It's actually quite exciting going out on a stormy day. But anyway, here's John. I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads. Now, these are the 7 great manifestations of the world empires of man, as underlined in the Bible. You can picture Egypt. God's people were in captivity under the Egyptians, oppressed by the Egyptians. You've got Joseph down there in Egypt. His father comes down to live in Egypt. The Pharaoh gives Egypt over to the land of Goshen, over to the children of Israel. Finally, another Pharaoh emerges and oppresses the children of Israel. So they're in captivity in Israel and so on in Egypt. You'd have to excuse me if my wires cross, and I rely a lot upon memory and hardly any notes. So God willing, this is all free fall. And with that, you can make a lot of mistakes. But free fall, I always think, works best, because with this, you can trust God. He's going to assist, and you're not totally reliant upon simply calculating and working this all out in your mind. So it's a lot to hold in your mind. And God willing, I'll say the right things. Sometimes I'm say the most ridiculous things. And look, how on earth did I say that? Because the thinking all got crossed in the mind. So, for clarity of thought, here's John, stood upon the sand of the sea. And you kind of picture the same kind of sea that Daniel had. And in Daniel, 4 winds, you picture them blowing upon the sea. So a very stormy sea. It's always good, I think, to get, it doesn't say stormy sea here, but it did in Daniel 7, 4 winds drove upon the sea. So 4 winds are blowing upon the sea. You're picturing a very stormy sea. The wicked are like the troubled sea, it says, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. So there is no peace, save my God, to the wicked, but these various kingdoms have emerged and tried to stay the waters, bring peace and calm to man, but they've never worked. There's always been kingdom rising and falling, and empire emerging and re-emerging and re-emerging and all this. And so all of this is underlined in the Bible. And the main thing they have in common here is they all ruled over God's people. In other words, what we got is the day of the time of the Gentiles, as it's called. In other words, in this world, it's always been under ungodly man, ungodly world empires. And all of this is going to change when Jesus comes back. So the ones that are largely underlined in the Bible are the ones that ruled over God's people of that day. Now, God's people of the day were once the children of Israel. They lost their crown when they crucified their own king, where you cut off your head and what have you got? A headless body. So they lost their crown, and the crown went over to what was called the Gentiles. And so the gospel is preached in all the world, and because the kingdom of man is now, kingdom of God is populated by children of men from various kingdoms. Back then it was largely under Israel. Israel lost its crown. But so all of these kingdoms ruling over God's people, Egypt ruling over Joseph, the Assyrian world empire. The children of Israel went into captivity to Assyria. The children of Israel went into captivity under Babylon. The children of Israel went back into captivity under Media-Persia. They went back under Greece. They were in captivity under Rome. We know when Jesus came, the children of Israel were hoping that he would come in and throw off the oppressive kingdom of Rome and give it to them, put them on the throne. Didn't happen, so they crucified their own king. But then they lost their world empire. They lost their dream of a world empire and were scattered into all the world in 70 AD. So all of these kingdoms, all these empires have all had one thing in common. They've always ruled over God's people. And so we have is the time of the Gentiles, the time in this world where the kingdoms of man have been given over to man. All these various kings and kingdoms and kings, right? A lot of them would have actually had that big spiritual encounter with Lucifer himself being taken to the top of a great high mountain. And he, it says, giving the kingdoms to whomsoever he will. But there's one clause you all have to go with, and that is bow, like he said to Jesus, bow down and worship me, and all of this will be yours. Bow down and worship me, and I will give you the United States of America. Bow down and worship me, and I will give you Great Britain. Bow down and worship me, and I will give you Israel. And so it goes on. This is what the cherry on the cake here is going to actually be Israel and Jerusalem. Bow down and worship me, and I will give you Israel. I will give you Jerusalem. So you kind of picture the Antichrist man being taken to the great high mountain, and the devil, right, giving him the land of Israel. All kingdoms of the world are now given into the hands of the devil, and he gives them to whomsoever he will. And this is how it's going to be. So, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So here's the horns again. Now don't forget, in Daniel it said that these 10 horns would re-emerge in the last days under the Antichrist world empire. He takes over 3 of them and thereby takes over all 10. So this is kind of the features of the Antichrist world empire. And again, it'll be much like Rome. It's re-emerging as Rome. It's re-emerging as a monstrous, oppressive empire that crushes and breaks in pieces and stamps the residue, stamps every other kingdom with its culture. This is what it's going. This is the final manifestation of all of these beasts. This is the final evolution of man. This is the final mutation of what you might call this virus. These kingdoms of man, the time of the Gentiles, until Jesus returns at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then the kingdoms of the whole world will be in the hands of Jesus. And it'll be the time of the Gentiles will be over. So, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So 7 heads, 7 great world empires: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, dual world empire, Greece, Rome. Now Rome, in this sense, re-emerged in the beast that was and is not, and yet is. The beast that was Rome is not, and yet is, because Rome is coming back. And so you'll have the re-emergence in this sense of the Roman Empire, these 10 kings that came up out of the breakup of the Roman Empire, still here to this day, and these will give their power and strength to the Antichrist. These will, in this sense, elect the Antichrist as being the new emperor of Rome. Rome, in this sense, never really went away. With the breakup of the Roman Empire, you had 10 kings that continue to this day to bring Rome back. These will give their power and strength to the Antichrist world empire. These will have one mind with the Antichrist world empire. And so they, in this sense, will elect the Antichrist, this little horn, as being the final emperor of Rome. So the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Now this is a description really of all the various beasts that Daniel saw coming up out of the sea in Daniel chapter 7. You check these out, you'll find one looked like a leopard, one was like a bear, and his feet, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. This was Alexander the Great in Daniel chapter 7. And his feet was the feet of a bear. This is also Media-Persia, the dual world empire, and his mouth as the mouth of the lion. This is Babylon. And the dragon gave him his power and his sea and grey authority. So the final manifestation of all of these beasts, in this sense, the Antichrist, the devil himself, taking the best of all of them, throwing them all together in one, and higgity-biggity bobbity bit. What have you got? You've got the re-emergence of the Antichrist world empire. In this sense, the beast that was and is not and yet is coming back, and you'll have the re-emergence of the Roman Empire, the final manifestation, the final evolution of man, all now rolled together in one and being largely like Rome being underlined as having the main features of the Antichrist world empire in the last days. So there's one more beast with horns here, and that was the Antichrist there. And I saw the heads as they were wounded unto death. This is Rome wounded unto death here. Verse 3, and I saw one of his heads, so the sick head you'd say here was Rome. Rome was foul, wounded unto death. And his deadly wound was healed. This is Rome coming back, the re-emergence of the Roman Empire, the devil finally getting his world empire back. Rome fell. He wants a world empire. He brings Rome back. In this sense, the beast that was Rome is not. It's God. Yeah, it is. It comes back. It's Rome. And his deadly wound was healed, and the world wondered after the beast. The beast is now brought in a whole new world empire. And they worship the dragon, right? Now here's the power behind it all. And they worship the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. Who's always been behind all of these great world empires? Who's been behind the great empire of Egypt? Who's been behind these great world empires that ruled over and oppressed? Who's been over these Gentile world empires? Who's been over these kingdoms, the time of the Gentiles, till the time of the Gentiles is over, till the time is over when all of these ungodly driven man worshipping Antichrist, devil worshipping kingdoms. Who's been over them all? The dragon, the devil, and they worship the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. So this is brought out really in Daniel, also in Revelation chapter 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. And this is the bride of Christ. And the moon under her feet. So clothed with the sun, she's always been the bride of Christ. There's always been the bride of Christ. Ever since the days of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve would have been the bride of Christ. They, of course, were seduced by Lucifer. They were taken in by his beauty. And Eve went over to Lucifer and worshipped him in eating the forbidden fruit. And Adam eating out of her hand. They were seduced. They committed spiritual adultery. But these, even so, had been the bride of Christ. So the bride of Christ has always been here since the beginning of time. So the bride of Christ, you picture here, the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. In the Old Testament, even in the New Testament coming in, and in the last days, he stood upon the sun. In the last days, it's going to be the dark end time days and darkness of night. But still some light here. Still the bride of Christ shedding her light, though clothed with the sun, though stood upon the moon, you picture there's going to be less light around in the last days. But even so, the moon might appear as a mere kind of thread of light in the sky. As time goes by, you have a full moon, you have less of a moon, you have half a moon, and then you have barely a tiny little streak of a moon, right into the last days until the darkest hour before the dawn. So you have the woman clothed with the sun, clothed with the true light which lighteth every man which cometh into the world. And as we go further into the last days, you picture this woman clothed with the sun, showing God's light to the world. Let your light so shine before men. Stood upon the moon, you picture, well, the moon kind of in the last days is barely going to be a moon left, a tiny little thread of a moon left, until the dawning of the new day, when the sun of righteousness arises with healing in his wings. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun. This is the bride of Christ down through history, even to the last days, being the moon, and the moon under her feet. And upon her head a crown of 12 stars, and the 12 children of Israel, once under Christ, really, in the Old Testament under God. And the 12 disciples, all under God, all under Jesus Christ. And she, being with child, travailed in birth and pain to be delivered. This is the birth of Jesus Christ. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon. This is the power behind it all. A great red dragon having 7 heads. So a 7-headed beast. Picture 7 heads there. 7-headed beast coming up out of the sea. 5 fingers, of course. 4 fingers in the fun. 5 fingers. Beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads. And another beast behind them, a dragon in fact, who's the power behind all of these great world empires. The dragon. So, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. Funny it's red because he pictured the world going over to kind of the form of world communism. Having 7 heads, 7 great world empires, final manifestation being the Antichrist world empire, and 10 horns. These 10 horns give their power and strength over to the Antichrist in the last days. These have one mind and give it all over to the Antichrist. And 7 crowns upon his head, 7 great kingdoms of man, 7 great world empires, 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth, so bringing down a third part of God's angels to the earth in the last days. So, again, you've got the horns there, and these horns now appearing on the 7-headed dragon. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads, 7 great world empires, and him being the power behind every one of them. That's Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, dual world empire, Greece, Rome, and finally the Antichrist world empire, a 7-headed dragon, over the power behind every throne, behind every king. So, one more beast with horns. I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb. Again, you've got a beast coming up out of the earth. He has 2 horns like a lamb. You're thinking, well, what on earth do these 2 horns symbolise? Is it just a case of 2 horns and so what? But horns throughout the whole Bible here, right down through Daniel and even in Revelation here, it's borne out that these horns are symbolic of powers. And we know from Daniel chapter 11 that the main thrust of the 2 horns, these 4 horns that came up out of Alexander the Great's kingdom, the 2 main players that have the main say and sway. In Daniel chapter 11, if you read through there, you'll find there's the king of the north and king of the south. So the world, in fact, largely split up into 2 parts, 2 halves. And these 2 largely battling it out with each other. And this, we're told, is going to be a feature in the last days. Because it says in Daniel chapter 8, in the latter time of their kingdom, in the latter time of the kingdom of these 4 horns that come up out of the breakup of Alexander the Great's 1 horn. Alexander the Great rose to power and died of some kind of illness or virus. These 4 generals take over. Then the main players are going to be the king of the north, king of the south, these battling it out. And then suddenly you'll find in Daniel chapter 11, yes, and in Daniel chapter 8, suddenly we're springboarded into the last days. And in the latter time of their kingdom, this king will stand up in the north. In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the fall, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And he stands up in the north, so in other words, north of Israel. And a lot of prophecies point to Magog being Russia, Gog being the Antichrist, and Magog being Russia. and the Antichrist coming up out of the north. And therefore, a lot of people feel or believe or choose to believe that the Antichrist will re-emerge in the last days. This kingdom of the north will come back in the last days. This king of the north, in the latter time of their kingdom, this king of the north that stands up, will indeed stand up in Russia. So the Antichrist standing up and coming out of Russia and re-emerging in Russia, and Russia re-emerging as becoming a great world empire. If you look at the history of Russia, and as you understand from the history, they broke up, these Union Soviet Socialist Republics broke up back in 1991. Here you have today Putin trying to bring all of these various countries, no doubt in the long run, back under Russia. So you're wondering again, is this now going to be the re-emergence of